Welcome. It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Cecilia Iglesias. She is a member of the school board in Santa Ana, also a candidate for the Assembly, the 69th Assembly District. Those communities in that district include Anaheim, Garden Grove, Orange, and Santa Ana. I'd like to speak with you first about education, then we can move on to some state issues, although they're all tied up, no doubt. I want to talk to you about what's known as the local control funding formula.
Correct.
It gives more funding to school districts with higher propensities of foster kids, English language learners, and economically disadvantaged.
Correct.
I presume Santa Ana would fall into that category.
We did.
Yeah, so talk to us about how LCFF is rolling out in your community.
Well, right now we're in the stages of wrapping up what we have with the local control accountability plan.
The LCAP.
The LCAP.
And tell me what your constituents, your stakeholders are saying, because under LCAP, as you know, you're required to seek input.
Correct.
From your stakeholders to see how they want you to spend discretionary dollars.
Yes, definitely.
What are they telling you?
So what we did, we had about 24 meetings for community meetings. We invited the public to come out to our schools and provide us their input on what they saw that was necessary and the most important critical things that we needed to focus on as school board members in order to ensure that the students were successful. So their input mainly in anything was parental engagement. They wanted to be have more support for the parents to be involved. Student input, those are things that we made it a point to hear from the students. How is it that you would want for us to serve you? And then also the whole thing we know with school climate, they wanted for us to ensure that we had resources to ensure school climate, that it was all positive and everything. So it was a lot based on more of the how to make it an environment for learning, What about from your community that may be Spanish dominant? What is their sense of how they want the schools to move forward? Because in a lot of ways, there's a lot of schizophrenia behind this notion of Spanish dominance. I mean, a lot of English dominant want to speak Spanish. They want to go to the dual language immersion programs. But then there's this pushback. We don't want bilingualism in schools. So, what are you hearing? No, our parents in our schools, they do want the dual immersion.
Sure.
Yeah, because, it's one thing that I know that we have to reclassify our English language learners.
Right.
And what we're giving is 5 years. After that they need to be fluent in English, but not to forget that speaking Spanish is an asset.
A huge asset.
So it's one of those things. One of those things that we're proud to say that in Santa Ana we are biliterate. With a seal of biliteracy.
No, I know what that means.
So when they graduate, a lot of our students are graduating with a seal of biliteracy.
And do you have dual language immersion programs in Santa Ana?
We do.
How are they doing? I think these programs are inspired.
No, they're doing awesome. And a lot of the times, we have some of the parents who are on a waiting list to kind of get into those programs because they want their child to also learn Spanish.
Right. The English dominant parents.
Yeah, correct.
Of course.
Correct. So
I want to talk to you about education as it relates to state issues, because you are running for the Assembly.
Yes.
And there is no doubt that education is a very important issue should you join that august body.
Right.
Under Prop 98, education is a mandatory 40+% of the budget. What is your vision for education, not as a school board member, but as a potential Assembly member?
We need to continue the whole thing with letting the locals, elected officials, continue to do their job. Yeah, discretion, because they're elected to do that by the people, and then that builds a sense of community. So I would hope that we would consider empowering the local elected officials to make those decisions, and for us at the state level to provide them the resources to make that happen.
There is no doubt that, wow, who would have thunk 5 years ago that all of a sudden school districts would get that discretion?
Correct.
I mean, Governor Brown, whatever you say about him, Democrat, Republican, he did really change the way schools are funded. You know as better than me, the categoricals were so tight.
Correct.
And you had no discretion whatsoever. Now you have a ton of discretion. But, with discretion comes responsibility.
Correct.
And so, tell me about that.
So those are the things, when we're looking at the money that's coming down and we're saying, it's okay, we have to be held accountable. So we want to tie those to performance. So we got to make sure that, everything that we do have a performance outcome.
What does that mean? Does that mean you look at standardized test scores and use that when you evaluate teachers?
I would hope so. I mean, that would be something that I do support because, but at the same time, we're going to have to provide the resources to the teachers. teachers to make them successful.
Right.
So, you know, so we all have to have those healthy conversations. That's why I believe what we're doing in Santa Ana, and I believe that could be a model for statewide, is having the conversations with all the stakeholders, which is the teachers, the educators, the you know, the principals, administrators, the community, even bring in like our partners, you know, bringing in like our churches,
sure,
you know, bringing in everyone, the business.
Takes a village.
Yeah.
One could say.
And then pretty much it does. That's how it works well in Santa Ana.
We talk about standardized tests, and I must say I don't envy anyone on a school board because you have so much coming at you.
Yes.
You have the LCFF, you have the LCAP, then you have Common Core,
Correct.
which changes the way teachers will be teaching and changes the way you offer standardized tests. So you now have these field tests that have been out for the last
Correct.
few months. How is that going? Because you know you're getting more discretion, but a new curriculum.
And that's the whole thing. I think when Common Core came down, my question was, you know, we wanted to get away from the no child left behind, because their focus was saying you're focusing just, you know, you're teaching to the test.
Right.
But with Common Core, you're still teaching to the test because you're kind of having.
It's a different test, though.
But I know, but it's a test.
It's an adaptive test.
So how do you do that? You know, so those are the questions that I have as a school board member. How do you?
But I want to ask you more about Common Core. I mean, as you know, today the philosophy has been that we want to teach several subjects, and really at the surface. With Common Core, we're digging deeper, but maybe fewer subjects. What's your sense of that?
As a parent, I don't get it. Meaning that I believe that our kids will rise to the level that we want them to.
Okay.
And with this, I feel like we may be limiting those that want to achieve more. I mean, it's like this whole thing. Not all kids learn the same way.
Right.
And that's why I feel providing the adequate resources would bring everyone to the same level. Because with that one, I just had one of the questions that I had is like, okay, how are we going to differentiate? Like right now, you know, we have the gifted and talented, the GATE students, and we have the honor students. Are we trying to make them all the same? What's really the goal? And that still hasn't been clarified. And those are the questions that I have and the concerns that I have, because having my son being, you know, in honors classes, I know he's, because of the resources that I provide as a parent, he's excelling. But if he's not going to be taught the things that I want him to teach, so it's kind of
tricky.
It's tricky.
So what made Cecilia Iglesias decide that she wanted to join the California State Assembly?
Just seeing the need of the possibilities of the things that can happen at the district level.
Right. So
our community is in such need of, like, you know, leadership, but within the community, someone that was homegrown, someone that's there with them, someone that understands the needs and the challenges that we face. You know, I have experience working for State Senator Mimi Walters. I mean, being a district representative for her, I see how much more we could do. But when I go back into my city, my district, I'm seeing, okay, it's not really happening.
So the challenge you would face, presuming you're victorious, is you would enter as a member of the minority party.
Correct.
You know, the Republican Party does not have a lot of seats in the California Assembly or the California State Senate. So how would you plan to work with your Democratic colleagues?
Yeah. When I work with anyone on the school board, I am one of two Republicans.
Sure.
I don't focus on the party. I focus on the issues. So what are the issues facing our community? And once we start focusing on the issues, talking to the people that really can make the difference, I think party goes out the wayside. It's not something that it's really prevalent.
So what are your voters telling you? What are your constituents saying to you?
No, they're very positive, because when I got elected to the school board, you know, as a Republican, they knew I was a Republican. With minimum, I only had $5,000 budget. I was elected. I got the most votes in that election, and it was a presidential election.
Wow,
So,
yeah, that's a Democratic sweep, generally speaking.
Correct. And then they asked me, Ceci, how did you do it? You know what? It's one of those things. I've been in this community. I grew up in Santa Ana. I am the face of the community. You know, it's mostly in Santa Ana. We're like 87% Latino. So, you know, so they saw that it's just who you are.
We wish you the very best of luck. Her name is Cecilia Iglesias. She is a member of the school board in Santa Ana, also a candidate for the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance, and this is California Edition. It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Kenn Young. He is the superintendent in Riverside County, an elected position. And so I want to speak with you about careers and career preparedness. What we know is that California, as we look into the future, may not have enough people graduating with certain degrees to meet the needs of the workforce. You're looking to change that. Talk to us about what you're doing to focus on career preparedness.
Well, students that go to college or students that don't go to college both have a common goal, and that's to get a good job, good paying job. And so what we find is that students that are going to college oftentimes will not necessarily take classes in high school that are geared towards careers. And so in our county, we have about 75,000 students a year that are in high school that are taking career preparation courses.
And would those careers be what we know as the vocational careers, or could it be careers that could be STEM, for example?
Right. Well, those careers pathways that students are typically taking lead towards a certification in a particular field. There's career technical education classes in the beginning that give them a lot of the reasoning skills, the interpersonal skills, some of the technical pieces, but then they'll move from there into more subject matter based material. And then they'll end up having some internships that go on, and they'll end up getting certification at the end of completing a sequence.
What I'm wondering though is, you know, we're so focused on college preparedness, but the reality is, sir, not everyone's going to go to college, and that's okay. That's okay. Right. But have we gotten to a place as legislators, as educators, that we're willing to admit that and therefore fund for, you know, regional occupation programs or career technical education?
Yeah, great question. So I think what we found is that the economy exposed the reduction in lower skilled jobs. So in certain areas of the state, like Riverside County, for example, we've actually had a drop back in the number of lower skilled jobs. So what we find is that there's a lot of people competing for jobs, those medium skilled jobs, that have college degrees. And so those who don't have at least some technical skills training, they can't compete. And that's why one of the reasons why our region still has stubborn unemployment, fairly high poverty.
Well stated, stubborn unemployment, because that's exactly what it is. It's stubborn.
So Brad, the economy has changed, the workforce has changed by and large, but some regions are stuck in making that transition.
So when we look at the state budget now, clearly we're doing better than we were a few years ago. And clearly Governor Brown is very fixated and focused on reinstituting cuts, especially to K-12, that were made during the budget crisis. But is it all focused on K-12, you know, A through G, get into college, or are we focusing on those that just may not be going to college?
Well, the state recently, in the new funding formula in fact, they overhauled the funding formula the first time in a long time.
Local control funding formula.
Yes, and that local control funding formula provided an augmentation for high school students to take career technical education, regional occupation classes. It was designed to give additional funding for students to have those classes.
And any high school student needn't be those in the targeted categories, foster.
All high school students earn that. All high school students are eligible to receive that funding from the state.
Along those lines, when we look at the local control funding formula, more discretion for districts, for counties of education, for example, but you also need to talk to your stakeholders. That is mandated by law. And we've had these local control accountability plans where I've spoken to many school board members, superintendents who've been talking to us about what the community is saying. What are they saying? Are they talking to you about career education, about regional occupation programs?
Well, the parents, first of all, in the elementary schools have a little bit different objective than the kids in the secondary schools. So if we started there, they want to make sure their kids learn how to read, make sure that their kids have some of the arts. They want to make sure that their students understand mathematics. They want to make sure that they're good citizens, that they have some character development that takes place. There's a variety of things that parents, stakeholders, want to have happen at the schools. As they move a little farther on, parents realize that kids are going to be leaving they're going to be getting of age where they typically will leave home. So they're more concerned at that point in time that they have the skills that they need, the training, the education that can help them have a better quality of life.
But are they saying, I keep harping on this issue as it relates to careers. I mean, you know, I have a relative, she was not going to college. It just was not happening. It doesn't make her a bad person. Just wasn't happening. And her parent saw that and steered her into, I guess it would have been a regional occupation program. She was spending half the day at high school, half the day at a hair training, at a hair salon.
That would be a regional program.
Right, and when she was done with high school, she had her certificate that allowed her to be a hairdresser. And she's had a wonderful career as a hairdresser.
So you're right. In our county, 45% of the students are not going on to post-secondary. That's fine. Some of them go into the military.
Which is wonderful.
Right. They can get all kinds of training and skills there. But we do need to, I think, two things, Brad. We need to give students the options give them the skills that they need for the options in the future. So if we tell them, don't worry about college, just focus on a career, we could be shorting someone's potential.
I understand.
And so what we're trying to do, though, is provide educational programs that are going to help all students be successful in the future.
What's interesting, though, is when we talk about lower skilled, and that's not pejorative, lower skilled, the lower skilled of the 21st century is not the lower skilled of the 20th century.
No, it's not.
Yeah, when you're lower skilled today, you need to know how to work a computer.
You need to know how to work a smart device. You need how to work a computer. You need to. There's several things that you need to know today just to fit into the basic functioning.
So, what are schools doing on that front? Is Common Core helping along those lines in terms of creating 21st century high school graduates?
Well, one of the things that was not in the 1997 standards, which we've had in English language arts and math since, for
1997.
1997. The use of computerized materials, computer instructions was really not embedded into that. So one of the things that's different about the Common Core is that the use of modern technology is embedded into the concepts there.
What I'm concerned about, though, is not the students, it's the teachers. I mean, I need the students to teach me how to use the computer devices, so how are the teachers doing trying to learn the computer devices?
I think you always have those that are on the cutting edge and those that are on the trailing edge, just like you have students.
Sure, yeah, but all the students know how to use smartphones now. It's the parents and teachers that don't know.
Right, and as adults, so you learn from your kids.
Right.
And so some of the teachers are on the cutting edge of everything. And they're helping their colleagues. Sometimes the students end up being the one that bring in the cutting edge for those that are struggling behind. And there's a marriage that happens there between youth and adult that helps reach the goal.
This year we adopted kind of a Common Core type of standardized test statewide, the field test. I know that we're not going to receive the results. That's another conversation as to whether we should. But what's the report on how the test went? Because the test was using modern technology. So how were the students faring, just anecdotally, in not bubbling in an answer but using a computer?
Well, I think the testing process itself was more effective for the students. It engaged them more. But one thing that it didn't do yet, it's the tests will eventually be computer adaptive, which means that
they weren't adaptive this year?
They were not. It was just computer based. But they'll become computer adaptive, which means that they will adjust their rigor based upon how a student answers a question.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a pretty accurate way. I mean, they've done a lot of field testing on the adaptive piece to see how accurate that would be, and I think that they've got this thing dialed in pretty well.
They're able to adapt as the test marches on because, let's say you missed the first question because you just made a mistake.
It gives it to you again. It gives you another question of the same rigor.
And so you can move up even if you have an early failure.
Right, so you have an early failure, it gives you another test of the same genre, but in the same difficulty, but it's a different question.
And so if you get it...
If you get it, it'll let you get another one of the same genre, and the same rigor. And once you've gotten 3 or 4 or 5, I forgot what the number is, it'll move you up, and it will find where your ceiling is. And if it gets you too high, it'll back you back down again.
Terrific. His name is Kenn Young. He is the Superintendent for Public Instruction in Riverside County. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is California Edition. This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Tim Strack. Now, he is a captain in the Riverside City Fire Department, but he was just named chair of the California Seismic Safety Commission. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, Brad.
Interestingly, your predecessor, Mike Gardner, a Riverside City Council member, so something about Riverside and earthquake safety must be in the water.
Well, it's great to both be on the commission and represent Riverside. We've got a significant risk here in Riverside. But it is kind of an honor for the city, I believe, to have two of us sequentially to be the chairman on really what's a very valuable commission for the state of California.
Talk to us about the commission. What is the role of the commission, and what do you hope to do as its chair now? I mean, it's a lay position, I guess you could say. There's an executive director. You're not on staff, but I mean, clearly it's a policy-creating position.
Yeah, it's a policy advisory to both the legislature and the governor's office on earthquake issues in California. The commission's made up of experts in many numbers. There's 20 commissioners, and all of them are appointed by the governor, or they have seats at large. Like there's an assembly member and a senator that sit on the committee. So it's kind of a clearinghouse, if you will, to do research, to fund research, to take programs and take analysis of look at the way we're doing earthquake stuff as we're moving forward. We do not take policy positions on legislation, so we're not somebody who's going to get in the middle of party politics.
I understand.
Try to be that advisory committee that sets back and takes a hard analysis from all the different angles to look at what's the best.
It's interesting, when I heard about your appointment, I thought that makes a lot of sense, because as someone who works in fire can often be the most damaging incident in the wake of an earthquake. We think about the San Francisco earthquake, which was, I guess, almost 110 years ago. It was the fire that caused all the havoc. The earthquake was almost tertiary at some point.
The commission has, as it's laid out in the government code, is structured by certain people fill certain positions, and I represent the fire services statewide.
Sure.
So there has been a fire person before me, there'll be a fire person after me.
But
it is one of the influential positions that we have on the commission.
I think about California, and part of the reason I think about California is I've recently had the good fortune to travel to various different countries that may or may not have the same advantages that we have, some in the Caribbean, and I think about Haiti and how that nation was decimated.
They still haven't recovered.
They haven't recovered, but at the same time I think about how if that earthquake occurred in Los Angeles or Riverside or San Francisco, I highly doubt that we would have faced the same damage that they have faced.
No, and we've had earthquakes that big. The one in Landers, luckily, was out in the middle of nowhere and essentially had no damage, but was massive. I mean,
But so that begs the question then. I mean, clearly, if a society does not put a value on construction and its safety, what you're going to get is a Port-au-Prince. And so we're kind of going through this time right now where we're trying to figure out what do we do next. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I lived in the valley during the Northridge earthquake, and I remember those soft story buildings collapsing. Los Angeles now is looking at evaluating and inventorying these soft story apartment buildings. What's your sense of that?
Well, while on the surface that may seem logical, there's a lot of concerns that we'll have to look at and evaluate and at least give a report of what we think. I think, though, as a property owner and as an advisory to policymakers, giving grades to somebody who may or may not want their house to be graded or their property or commercial, which could have a significant impact on the value of that property. And even then...
Well, that's an understatement. I mean, Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles has indicated he may want, as you suggested, to give grades to buildings, kind of like the restaurants.
Yeah, I personally, I'm not sure I'd want to have the property that got that grade.
Right,
that was
clearly.
And then, as soon as you try to sell it, you got to disclose it in property values. And I think that's where we want to try to emphasize safety. But even there has to be a balance. It's not necessarily the commission's role to run around and say soft story buildings need to be reinforced. unfunded mandates,
Can be
stuff that's been building things that are fix-its that are supposed to go on to buildings that are going to turn into huge cost to businesses. It's not good for business in California.
Mayor Garcetti of Los Angeles has indicated he'd consider whether mandatory retrofitting should be required, but like you said, a tremendous expense. I also want to ask you, if I may, about our nuclear plants here in California. I recently was coming home from San Diego. And I looked and I saw San Onofre, and I thought, well, that's not operating anymore, so there's no risk there.
Well, that's not. That's
that's actually well stated.
There's a lot of risk there.
Yeah, there still is all the nuclear waste that's still there. I mean, I don't want to be hyperbolic and create fear, but Diablo Canyon is operating. A lot of discussion around Diablo Canyon. So again, I know you're not in a policy-making role, but what does the commission do with this plant that has been mothballed in San Diego, a very functional plant in San Luis Obispo County?
Well, we sit. Our executive director sits on the committees that work on the safety and either the tear down or the buildup of those, and are constantly analyzing it. But these are in partners with the NRC, the State Energy Commission,
Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
So we do have a time and a place to put input into what our concerns are. The reality is the plants are very, very safe. Is there risk? I mean,
there's risk to everything.
Right. There's some sense of risk of living on the planet. I mean,
but I think the reason why it's on top of mind, or not so much anymore, was what happened in Fukushima.
Sure.
One could argue, though, that what happened in Fukushima was kind of nuclear safety working. I mean, there was a leak, we know that. We don't know what's going to happen, 10, 20 years from now, but it does appear that there was containment. Am I right?
Yeah, it was contained for a while. Again, the fire actually made it worse.
Back to fire.
Right. But you got to remember, too, and we've actually taken more steps now to look at tsunamis and earthquakes. Tsunami wasn't talked about 20 years as much.
But do we have much risk of tsunami on the West Coast?
There's places. It's really significant. Not Northern California, Crescent City's had several.
Right, I remember that.
Santa Cruz has had a couple.
Right.
Orange County has some risk.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's more of being ready for those type of incidents and learning from the history of the events that happened in the past. And the Japan tragedy, unimaginable tragedy, was two whammies right in a row. And that, is that going to happen? Sure, it could happen.
Right.
Do we want to manage it and mitigate it as much as we can? Yes.
Right.
But really, it all comes down to California is to living in earthquake country, is being prepared.
There's also discussion, as we are in the midst of a drought, about our water safety.
Sure.
Well, I'm sure about the Delta, and if the Delta should fail for whatever reason, the damage to the Southern California economy could be astronomical. I mean, cataclysmic. Again, these are huge what-ifs, but will the commission be looking at those issues and Delta safety?
I think that dovetails right to it. Actually, something that we've worked on significantly is agriculture.
Right.
We're working with UC Davis right now on the agriculture risk, and we've actually looked at the agriculture risk all the way from Northern California, looked at the Salinas Valley, all the way to cattle ranching and processing in the Imperial Valley post the Brawley plant. And if you remember, we lose water system and power systems. That puts all those plants offline. We lose transportation. It means they can't get goods to the market. So that is one of the instances where the commission spends a lot of time bringing in experts from the field. This instance, it was UC Davis, to discuss the concerns and make us aware. And then we have reports, and then we consider that stuff. And if that's something that needs to be possibly regulated or somebody wants to use it, then it's there and it's available.
His name is Tim Strack. He is the newest chair of the California Seismic Safety Commission from the great city of Riverside, California. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is California Edition.